Right, I believe now we will go to Brussels and hear from Henrik Hololei, the Director General for Transport and Mobility at the European Commission. His speech is entitled "A Forward-Looking Transport Strategy Leads the Way in a Post-COVID Era."
Yeah, thank you so much with us today. So welcome to Mr. Henrik Hololei, the Director General of Transport and Mobility at the European Commission. Just to give a brief introduction, transport directly affects everyone in Europe, whatever age they are and whatever activities they undertake. Transport and mobility play a fundamental role in today's world. The aim of the Commission is to promote a mobility that is efficient, safe, secure, and environmentally friendly, and to create the conditions of a competitive industry generating growth and jobs. So, the coronavirus is spreading across the European Union, affecting lives in many ways. Governments have taken various restrictive measures to curb the spread of the coronavirus to protect lives. The situation is changing fast, and so is the response by member states. What are your concerns about the impacts of the virus on the 5 specific modes of transport: air, road, rail, maritime, inland, and waterway?
Good morning, Sumaira, and good morning to everyone. I am very, very happy that I have the opportunity to link up with you, and I would have so much rather like to be present there physically and see you all, because technology can only do so much, but it cannot ever replace the human contact and the human warmth and the human expressions that you actually experience when you are together in the big conference room, and when you can also see how the reactions are. But this is what we have learned from the coronavirus, and at least we are able to link up around the world. As you also said in your introductory words, Sumara, then the coronavirus has very much affected, of course, our lives here in Europe, and very much so everything related to transport, but more specifically to travel and tourism. If we look at this crisis and compare it to the crisis we had 10 years ago, the financial and the economic crisis, then in a way it is very different, even as the economic impact short term is very severe and comparable, or maybe even worse. Then this drop in the economic activity is not equal as it was 10 years ago, where it was far more equal between the different sectors. And this time there are sectors which come out extremely well, and there are sectors which are really in very difficult situation. And I don't think that I will be exaggerating when I would say that the tourism, travel, transport and mobility sector is the hardest hit, because if your revenues basically evaporate from one day to another, and you are faced by a crisis which is not the result of a structural problems or some kind of economic wrong decisions, then nobody, and I repeat, nobody is ever ready for that. When I look at the impact, of course, what we see is that people don't travel. But even worse, the governments are not encouraging people to travel. It, of course, means that the tourism hospitality industry, but also everything related to transport, is very hard hit. Yes, transport is delivering when it comes to freight and cargo. For example, when we look at aviation, we see that the cargo flights are actually up compared to a year ago, because there is not anymore the normal commercial airplanes which used to carry cargo in the belly that are there in the air. So this is being compensated. When we look at how it affects people's travel, then we are down something like 75–80%. The flights are down altogether in the European airspace about 65%, comparable what they were about 30 years ago. The effects are really serious. And when I look at the other transport modes, then the picture is largely the same. Freight is doing fine. we also had a big difficulty at the beginning of the crisis when the member states in Europe closed borders, which we had never seen over the last decades or ever before when European cooperation started. And of course, by closing borders to the people, they didn't realize first that they are also closing borders for freight. And we had to find ways how to make sure that all the important goods like medical products or food products or even the different parts for keeping up the factories can still continue to smoothly cross the borders. And that we managed to deliver, and that was extremely important because it kept our internal market going and people were getting the products they wanted to and needed to. But of course, again, for the people, it's different. What can be done? And as far as we can see, and again, I mean, just to continue on the different modes, maritime, cruise industry, I mean, there is no cruises basically in Europe. When we look at the cross-border coaches, then very, very little. We are also down something like 90%. And of course, what can be done? And the first and foremost, it is about restarting travel. But for restarting travel, you need that the member states do not apply all the quarantines and all kinds of restrictions. And if there would be some kind of a unified approach which allows to plan travel, which allows also to take the necessary steps so that the restoration of transport and mobility activities and travel and tourism activities can start. And this is not easy to come because health issues are part of the sovereign decisions of the member states. Member states have also different approaches. And at the same time, we are saying that our assessment, which is backed by the medical professional, is that when you are traveling and when you're using transport, it is not really at the moment when you get infected or you are infecting others, because there are also health safety protocols. Aviation, for example, is very safe, and it's been also proved by the fact that there are no transmissions during flights, or very few have happened, at least, which are documented. So there are a lot of myths, there are a lot of perceptions. There is still the uncoordinated and not common rules for traveling, and of course that all continues to affect the transport sector. So we all hope, of course, that the vaccine will enter the market soon and as many people as possible get vaccinated as soon as possible. But before that, it is very difficult also to see that the orderly and coordinated way of traveling will resume, which of course would mean that the normalization of transport systems is not going to happen yet, and it will take some time until we get to the situation where we were before. But also, let's be honest, the world will never be exactly the same. Every big crisis has also brought differences and new things, and I'm sure that this crisis has also changed the world a bit. I don't think it has changed fundamentally. I think people are still the same. They want the same things. They want to travel. They want to use transport. They want to go around. But at least in the beginning, getting back the travelers' confidence, making people to use transport, including public transport, will take some time and also some persuasion. But at the same time, I'm an optimist. This is a very good sector. This is a sector which has a high degree of resilience, and it will come back stronger.
Thank you. Yeah. So to slow down the spread of the virus and protect the health and well-being of all Europeans, some travel restrictions have been necessary. The European Commission is doing its utmost to allow people to meet friends and family and to ensure free movement of citizen goods and services with full respect to health and safety measures. Could you share with us shortly the initiative of platforms to respond specifically in safely resuming travel? MOBI contact tracing applications, a common approach to travel restrictions on travel to the EU, exemptions from restrictions on travel to the EU, passengers and travelers' rights, advice for customers in the EU, consular assistance for EU citizens aboard exemption categories as concerns travel to EU.
Thank you, Sumara, and again, I think that these are all extremely valid questions, because in order to mitigate the issues related to the crisis, it is actually very, very important to have the different systems in place and to make sure that there is as much as possible a coordinated approach. One of the very important things, of course, is to make sure that there is always the highest level of health safety secured, and that all the operators are adhering to these principles which are laid down by those authorities who are responsible for health issues. The health and the well-being of the people traveling public is obviously the first and foremost priority. But of course, as said, there is never a possibility to avoid risk entirely. Risk avoidance means that people stay at home and don't leave it. And even then you might have some degree of risk. But what traveling also means, and what we try to achieve, is the maximum possible risk mitigation. And one thing is also to make sure that we know how the people move around, because there is always a possibility that somehow you get infected unknowingly by someone who doesn't even know that he or she is infected. So for traveling, this also means that there has to be efficient systems of contact tracing, because through the contact tracing, you will be able to identify the people who could be potentially infected, and also then in different states take the necessary measures to make sure that these people will not infect further people in the society. And yes, there are also local contact tracing apps, and the interoperability of these contact tracing apps is important. But this is more for the wider public. I think we are looking also more for the traveling aspect. And one of those aspects is the passenger locator form, which many travelers have got also used to, which has been very often in paper format, and also making it more difficult to have a useful product. So one of the things we are currently working on also is digital passenger locator forms, which allows, based on very simple data and according to all the data protection rules, to identify those travelers who could have been at risk, and to be able to contact them, and also then take the necessary measures when needed. This is another measure to try to increase the credibility of traveling, and the credibility of the fact that traveling in a safe way from the health perspective is possible, and if anything happens, there is a possibility also to reach out as soon as possible. There have also been attempts to have other coordinated measures. It also, of course, includes the certain way of trying to have a common approach towards the quarantines which are needed, as well as the wider use of different tests. We all know that the PCR tests are the most accurate ones, but they are also more time consuming, while at the same time the rapid antigen tests, which are very often favored also by the traveling companies, by the airlines and others, having certain challenges with the accuracy, at the same time being faster. But the main thing is trying to coordinate these activities, trying to see that different member states in Europe would have a similar approach. And this, of course, will help to make travel easier, because today one of the problems is that when you are in one country and want to travel another, and then to the third country, there might be different rules in all these countries, and it is really difficult to understand what you have to do, how much you have to quarantine, or what kind of tests you have to take. So if there is a common approach, that will at least make it more predictable and easier. And of course, at the same time, you also mentioned very important elements, which are the passengers and travelers' rights. I mean, we have said from the beginning of the crisis in Europe that the passenger rights rules are continuously in force, and passengers can rely upon them. And of course, it is something which is again very important for the travelers, because if they would not be assured that all their rights are there, then it will be even less willingness to travel. At the same time, we also know that it has taken time to reimburse all the tickets, because the different transport companies have also had big challenges in terms of their cash reserves, and it has simply taken more time, but at least it is a positive process which is ongoing. And then, of course, it is the travel between EU countries and the third countries, and there are certain common rules and certain common principles in terms of the number of infections that the countries have, also the number of tests they take, and the idea has also been to have as much as possible a common understanding in terms of the entry rules. So many of those things have been actually taken on board, which were issues we never had to deal with in the past. But of course, with this crisis, the results and proposals had to be put on the table in a short notice, and since it's a new situation, it also takes time until we get to a more common and predictable framework. But again, traveling will resume, and I sincerely hope that it will happen sooner than later.
We hope so too. And traveling, I think, is at the heart of Europe. You know, it's a part of Europe's DNA, with so many countries in that community. With the goal of achieving climate neutrality by 2050, as transport accounts for a quarter of the EU's greenhouse gas emissions, the sector will play a crucial role in achieving the target, and has been set the objective for reducing its emissions by 90% by 2050. What is sustainable mobility? Could you elaborate on it?
Thank you very much, Sumaira. And I mean, I think one of those things we talked about earlier, that when the traveling comes back and the vaccine is there, and the people are more confident to travel, then what is going to change? And I think that one of those changes is definitely the fact that traveling as a whole and transport in general will become and has to become more sustainable. The sustainable traveling, sustainable transport is going to be very much at heart of many of those activities that will be undertaken in Europe in the next years and also in the next decades. As you rightly pointed out, and as is the priority of this Commission, is to deliver on the European Green Deal, which ultimately means that Europe should become by 2050 a carbon neutral continent. What does it mean for transport, which, as you rightly pointed, is responsible for 1/4 of the carbon emissions? It means that transport has to decarbonize 90% of what it is today. And this is, of course, a very, very significant challenge that needs to be undertaken. But I believe that it is needed. I believe that this is also something where Europe has shown global leadership and continues to show. And there are also other regions in the world and other countries who have set similar targets. Lately, the new government of Japan, for example, has also indicated that they intend to be carbon neutral by 2050. So this is something which is of definitely a global trend. So how to get there? What does it mean? It means, of course, that all transport modes have to decarbonize. There is no way that we can have a transport mode which is not doing its part, especially when taking into account the fact that all of them are emitting a lot of CO2 emissions. The largest, of course, being the road sector, but I'm also confident that with many different proposals that will curb the emissions in the transport sector, in the road sector, a lot of progress will be made. And of course, maritime and aviation. And rail is largely carbon neutral today, and so are inland waterways. So I maybe leave that a bit aside, even though, as I say, every sector will have to do its part to become more sustainable. We need to make also sustainable alternatives widely available, and we need to put in place the right incentives. So how to get there? There is not a single way how to get there. It is a combination of different measures. A very important role is played by the sustainable transport fuels. I think we are going to see quite a lot of uptake of different sustainable transport fuels. I mean, we all know about the electricity and electrification, but nowadays there is also a lot of hope for hydrogen solutions, and it is clear that hydrogen can be very attractive in heavy goods vehicle transportation, in shipping, and nowadays also, for example, Airbus has been saying that they are going to put a lot of focus on the innovation and making a hydrogen plane available in 2035. So I believe there is a lot of untapped potential there. We also have the sustainable liquid fuels, different kind of new generation biofuels. There are also the transitory fuels. It is clear that in the shipping, for example, the LNG will play a role for quite some time to come, because you just don't change from one ship to another overnight, which are also very expensive assets. And one other element is, of course, the better interaction of different transport modes, which we call multimodality. If you can optimize the use of different transport modes for deliveries, for journeys, you can also reduce the carbon footprint. And there, a key role is played by digitalization, by the smart solutions. Digitalization is changing transport all the time, and even more so in the next 5 years than it has perhaps done in the last 25 years, because this process is very fast. More and more data becomes available, and hopefully open data. So there could be also more solutions in the market. The good thing about it is not only about innovation and efficiency, but it also clearly, through these measures, reduces the overall carbon footprint of the transport sector. So smart solutions, multimodality, innovation, and of course, it all boils down to the people's behavior, which is also very much related to the affordability. Our Commissioner for Transport will present in a few weeks' time a strategy for sustainable and smart mobility in Europe, which is supposed to be the framework for this work for the next decade and beyond. And I'm sure that this can also be a very interesting read and a very interesting basis for other friends and colleagues around the world, at least to see how and in which way in Europe we see the path towards a more sustainable transport system and also towards a more sustainable world.
Wow, thank you, Henrik. That was really very insightful. What I picked up, one thing in there was LNG being important for the shipping industry, because my husband's in shipping, so I will convey that message to him. But this is like you were very expressive. You've expressed a whole slew of activities that Europe or European Commission is undertaking, and I think it's a real role model for the rest of the world to follow. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate you joining us today, and hopefully we do it again in face-to-face at some point.
Thank you so much, Sumaira, and also thank you for having me. Thank you for this very interesting conversation and for allowing me to tell more about the challenges, but also the opportunities we have in the future. I hope and I wish you very interesting days and a very interesting day to come. And I'm sure there will be most thought-provoking discussions about the world of today and the world of future. I wish you all the best, all the luck, but also most importantly, stay well, stay healthy, and see you soon.
See you soon. Thank you, Henrik. And over to the team in Turkey, please. Thank you.